He had money, power, and everything the world could offer. But what he discovered while pretending to be in a coma was something he never expected, something priceless. The room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Millionaire patient lay motionless, eyes closed, pretending to be in a coma. He had chosen silence, testing the people around him, curious about what truths might slip through the stillness. The soft shuffle of shoes entered the room, and the scent of lavender soap lingered in the air. It was his nurse, the one who had stayed by his side far longer than her duty required. Her hands were gentle as she adjusted his blanket, tucking it neatly beneath his chin. She sighed, a long breath that carried a weight of unspoken words. Then, in a voice trembling with both fear and tenderness, she began to speak. "I know you cannot hear me," she whispered, "but you are not just my patient. You are my reminder that kindness still lives in this world." Her words poured out slowly, as if a dam had broken inside her. "I watched you help the other patients when no one was looking. You never asked for thanks, never expected recognition, and that made me believe that even those with wealth can carry the warmest hearts." The millionaire's chest tightened. He felt every word pressing against the wall of his silence. Her voice softened even more, almost breaking. "You gave me courage when I thought I had none. Even without knowing, you healed parts of me I thought were beyond repair." A tear slipped down her cheek and landed softly on his hand, though his body remained still. His heart thundered in his chest. The nurse leaned closer, resting her forehead gently on the back of his palm. "I do not know why I am saying this," she murmured, "but I needed you to know. You have changed my life." The millionaire felt a rush of warmth flood through him, stronger than any medicine, and though he longed to open his eyes, he held himself back, afraid of breaking the fragile honesty she had just revealed. Her confession lingered in the room, like a sacred secret, filling the air with something deeper than words. The nurse lifted her head slowly, brushing the tear away with the back of her hand. She sat down beside him, her voice steady but fragile. "My family thinks I am wasting my time here," she said quietly. "They do not understand why I stay so long after my shifts end." Her fingers traced the edge of the blanket in nervous circles. "They do not know that sitting here feels like home, that somehow, in your silence, I find peace." The millionaire's throat ached, as if the words she spoke were pressing against him from the inside. Her smile flickered, faint but real, though her eyes were still wet. "Sometimes I imagine what it would be like if you woke up, if you could see me, not just as a nurse, but as someone who truly cares." Her voice broke for a moment, but she continued, "I know it is foolish, but I pray for you every night, not because of your wealth, but because the world is softer with you in it." The room seemed to grow warmer, filled with the weight of her sincerity. The millionaire fought the urge to squeeze her hand, his heart burning with gratitude he could not yet show. The nurse leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if searching for strength. "I am not brave enough to say these words if you were awake," she admitted. "Maybe that is why I speak them now, when I think you cannot hear." Her hand found his again, holding it gently, as though it were something precious. "You are not alone," she whispered. "Not now, not ever." The millionaire felt the warmth of her hand settle into his skin, steady and comforting. Each second stretched endlessly, her words echoing louder in his heart than the monitor's steady beeps. Her breath trembled as she continued, "Before I met you, I thought kindness was something people only pretended to have. But you proved me wrong." She lowered her gaze, her lashes damp from fresh tears. "You never knew. But when my father was sick, I had no money for his medicine. And somehow, it was you who paid the hospital bill, without even letting me know it was you." Her voice cracked, but her grip on his hand grew firmer. "I only found out later, and I promised myself I would repay that kindness, even if it took a lifetime." The millionaire's heart pounded so fiercely he thought she must feel it beneath her touch. His eyes burned behind closed lids, fighting back the tears he could not reveal. The nurse leaned closer, her voice barely a breath now. "If you wake up one day, I hope I will have the courage to tell you this while you look at me. Until then, let my care be enough." Her head lowered again, resting against his arm. As silence wrapped around them like a tender blanket, the millionaire felt every fiber of his being straining against the silence he had chosen. Her head against his arm was so light, yet it weighed heavier than anything he had carried in years. He wanted to lift his hand, to brush her hair back gently, to show her that her words had reached the deepest part of him, but he remained still, listening, holding on to every sound she made, The nurse breathed slowly, her voice muffled against his sleeve. You gave me hope when I thought my life would always be filled with struggle. You reminded me that even in the hardest moments, someone can still care. Her fingers traced across his knuckles, delicate, as though she feared he might break. I do not care if you are rich, or powerful, or admired by the world outside. To me, you are simply the man who taught me to believe in goodness again. The millionaire felt a tear escape the corner of his eye, sliding quietly into his hairline. The nurse lifted her head suddenly, her lips parting in shock at the single tear she had seen. Her eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat for a heartbeat. The world stood still between them, her hand froze over his, trembling as if she dared not believe what her eyes had just witnessed. The tear glistened against his temple, proof that something beneath his stillness was alive and listening. Her lips quivered, forming words she barely had the strength to speak. You can hear me, cannot you? She whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of the question. The millionaire's heart thundered so loudly, he feared it would betray him completely, but he could no longer hide behind silence. Slowly, painfully, his fingers twitched against her palm. The nurse gasped, a sharp sound that filled the quiet room like a spark in the dark. Her hands flew to her mouth, tears flooding her eyes as she leaned closer. You are here, she breathed, her voice trembling with both disbelief and joy. The millionaire's lips parted, dry and heavy, but his voice cracked through the stillness. I heard everything. The words were broken, barely more than a whisper, yet they carried the weight of a confession. Returned. The nurse's tears spilled freely now, falling onto his hand as she clasped it tightly. You came back, she sobbed softly, her smile shining through the tears. The millionaire's gaze flickered open, weak but filled with a warmth deeper than wealth could ever buy. And for the first time, he let her see the gratitude and tenderness he had kept hidden behind closed eyes. The nurse bent closer, her face glowing with relief as his tired eyes met hers. Her hands cradled his gently, as if he were made of fragile glass. You do not know what this means to me, she whispered, her voice unsteady but filled with light. The millionaire's lips curved into the faintest smile, his strength barely enough to hold it. I know more than you think, he murmured, his voice raspy but steadying with each word. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her heart racing as she searched his gaze for truth. You heard everything, she asked, her voice trembling like a secret exposed. He blinked slowly, his eyes glistening, and squeezed her hand with the little strength he had. Every word, he said, and every word healed me more than medicine ever could. The nurse's breath hitched, her tears falling freely as she pressed his hand to her cheek. You were never alone, she whispered again, but this time, her voice carried joy instead of sorrow. The millionaire let his head rest deeper into the pillow, his gaze soft yet unwavering on her face. For the first time in my life, he said gently, I believe that. The nurse's smile trembled as she held his hand closer, her tears still shining like jewels on her cheeks. You must rest, she said softly, though her voice carried the warmth of someone who would never leave. The millionaire's eyes lingered on her, fragile but filled with a quiet strength. I will rest, he answered, because now I know I am resting in the care of someone who truly sees me. Her heart tightened, her chest aching with a mixture of joy and disbelief. For so long, she had hidden her feelings in silence, afraid they would never matter. Yet here he was, looking at her as if her words were the very thing keeping him alive. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, her fingers trembling, and whispered, You have given me more than I could ever repay. The millionaire's lips curved into a tired but tender smile. Then let me give you this, he said slowly, each word carrying the weight of truth. My wealth has built many things, but nothing has ever built the peace you have given me. Stay with me, not as my nurse, but as the one who brought me back. The nurse's breath caught, her hand tightening around his, as if anchoring herself in the moment. Her tears fell again, but this time they were tears of joy, unashamed and pure. I will stay, she whispered, her voice steady now. As long as you need me, I will stay. The millionaire's tired eyes softened, relief washing over his face like sunlight breaking through clouds. His fingers curled weakly around hers, but the gesture carried more strength than any grand display. For years I was surrounded by people, he said slowly, yet I have never felt less alone than I do now with you. The nurse lowered her head, her smile trembling as tears traced new paths down her cheeks. You do not need to say these things, she whispered. Your health is what matters now. But he shook his head faintly, his gaze never leaving hers. My health returned the moment I heard your voice, he replied, his tone soft yet certain. Her heart swelled at his words, filling her with a warmth she could not contain. She leaned closer, her forehead resting lightly against his, careful not to disturb his fragile state. You will not face anything alone again, she murmured, her voice like a vow. The millionaire closed his eyes, briefly, letting the promise settle deep within him. When he opened them again, his expression carried a peace he had not known in years. You have given me something no amount of wealth ever could, he whispered. A reason to live, not just for myself, but for someone who truly cares. The nurse pressed his hand to her heart, her tears falling freely as she held him close. And you, she answered softly, have given me the courage to love without fear. The millionaire's breath came steadier now, his chest rising and falling in a calm rhythm. Her words lingered in the room, wrapping around him like a tender embrace. He searched her face, memorizing every tear, every tremor of her lips, every spark of honesty in her eyes. All my life, he said quietly, I measured worth in numbers, in what I could build and own. But here, with you, I see that true worth is measured in moments like this. The nurse's lips parted, her heart thundering in her chest. You do not need to give me anything, she whispered. Just being here, awake, is more than I could ever ask for. A faint smile curved his lips as his thumb brushed clumsily against her hand. Then allow me to give you what no fortune ever touched, he murmured, his voice faint but unwavering. My trust, my gratitude, and my heart. Her breath caught, her eyes shining brighter than before, though her voice wavered with disbelief. You mean that? She asked softly, as though the truth might shatter if spoken too loudly. His gaze held hers firmly, fragile in body but unbreakable in spirit. With every part of me, he whispered. The nurse bowed her head, tears spilling onto their joined hands, her smile radiant through the storm of emotion. Then I will cherish it, she said gently. And I will never let you face this world alone again. The millionaire's eyes glistened, his breath trembling with a relief that felt almost sacred. Her words were not a promise of duty, but of something far deeper, something he had longed for without even knowing it. He tightened his hold on her hand, weak yet filled with meaning. For the first time, he whispered, I feel like a man, not just a name or a fortune. The nurse brushed a tear from his cheek with tender care, her smile breaking through the veil of her own tears. To me, she said softly, you have never been your fortune. You have only ever been the man who showed kindness when no one else would. His chest ached, not with illness, but with the weight of gratitude he could never fully express. You saw me when others only saw what I owned, he murmured, and that saved me. She leaned closer, her voice gentle, carrying the steadiness of a vow. Then let me keep seeing you, every day, exactly as you are. A calm silence filled the room, broken only by the steady beat of the heart monitor, a quiet rhythm of life renewed. The millionaire closed his eyes briefly, letting her words sink into the deepest part of him, and when he opened them again, his gaze was filled with something pure. Stay, he said softly, not because I need you, but because I cannot imagine tomorrow without you. The nurse's breath caught at his words, her heart swelling with an emotion she could no longer hide. She tightened her hold on his hand, her tears now shining with joy instead of sorrow. I will stay, she whispered, her voice steady and full of certainty. Not because of duty, but because I choose you. The millionaire's lips curved into a gentle smile, a smile that carried more wealth than all his treasures combined. The room, once heavy with silence, now felt alive with hope, as though the very air had shifted around them. For the first time in years, he felt more than alive. He felt seen, cherished, and whole. And as their hands remained joined, their hearts beat in quiet harmony, not as nurse and patient, not as rich and poor, but as two souls who had finally found their way to one another. It was not the end of his story, nor hers. It was the beginning of a new one, written not in wealth or power, but in the simple, unshakable truth of love.